Oh, the humanity. This thing doesn't get any less techie by the day, does it? Why don't you play a game with me? A game of Do You Remember When? Because this is becoming more important, more pertinent by the second in this love triangle that is Mercedes, Maximilian Verstappen and Red Bull. Do you guys remember when Jos Verstappen said that if Christian Horner remains as Red Bull team principal, that team, the Bulls that are red, would implode? Do you remember when Verstappen's dad, Verstappen Sr., said that young Maximilian Verstappen was driving around fundamental flaws that characterised, that epitomised that RB20, that no longer did they have the dominant package? Do you remember when Maximilian Verstappen echoed those sentiments? Again, the speculation and conjecture was that the RB20, it was just a blip, that they would soon revert to mean and become the dominant package yet again. Do you remember? Do you remember when asked at Spain whether Red Bull, whether they were going to fall victim of their own success, and between now and the end of the season, the story would be one of convergence, whether McLaren had truly bridged the gap and whether Max was going to struggle to win races between now and the end of the season? Do you remember when to that Maximilian responded, sadly, you'll need a dominant car if you're going to continue to win races. That we, said Max Verstappen, cannot be perfect each and every single race. Oh, the humanity. And it gets techier. Do you remember at the pre-race press conference this weekend? Do you remember when Max was asked, could he put a nail in all this speculation about his potential move to Mercedes away from the Bulls that are red? Do you remember what he said? What we need to do, Maximilian Verstappen responded, is make sure that we have a competitive package. Of course, we are all working towards that, but that's what's all important. Do you remember when Brooksy of Sky Sports F1 expanded upon that question, rammed it home? Her question went something like this. Do you mean to say if you don't have a competitive package, Max, that you might leave? Do you remember when to that Maximilian responded, I've got a contract until 2028. Next year, I will be here. Oh, the humanity peddlers. What are we doing? This is absolutely bonkers. Let it go. What are we talking about? This is happening in real time. Chat, let what go? I will not do the thing that plagued me around the Lewis Hamilton to Ferrari. Oh, no, why are you talking about Lewis Hamilton to Ferrari? And then all of a sudden it becomes a real thing and everybody wants to get on board the reality train. This is techie. All of the aforementioned, I remember, and you remember when those happened, and it is techie. It gets techier and techie by the day. 2, Toto Wolff remembers, because when questioned on it by OE24, he responded thus. The question, of course, being, when Max was asked, are you driving for Red Bull next year, yes or no? He said, according to the Bild newspaper, have you not listened? Yes, we are working on improvements. Well, he hardly answered the question, and Toto Wolff concurred. Wolff's response was, I don't think Max clearly said yes. Toto Wolff is right. Toto, the boy who cried wolf, is absolutely on the money, and he expanded. Does that mean that you haven't given up hope that Maximilian Verstappen might come to Mercedes one day as soon as 2026 on the promise that is a god tier market leading Mercedes power unit? Toto, the boy who cried wolf, responded thus, as I always say, we'll keep our free seat for as long as possible. First and foremost, we have to make our car faster. If the car goes fast drivers will want to join us. Here's where we are then, peddlers. Toto Wolff wants to put Mercedes back at the mountaintop. His line of least resistance is twofold: build a quick car, put a very fast, powerful power unit in there as far as its maximal output. Secondly, get Max Verstappen. The chap is making it clear for anyone that will listen to him, this has to be the modus operandi. I'm not sure it's not a real thing, you know, not to say that Max will definitely leave, but this is an option that he for sure will be exploring. Max wants to maximise his opportunity to win races and championship. And how do you not do that but by being in the fastest car? Toto Wolff continues. He was asked, "Are you a Max fan?" He responded, "I admire his achievements, and as a person I have come to know him as an extraordinary young man." Oh, the humanity. What are we doing here? Just gets realer by the second. OE24 expands. Does that mean he's still your favourite to have a seat in 2026? Wolff responds, "I've said it a lot recently. Max is the best driver at the moment." Oh, the humanity. F3P, you are a legend. What are we doing? Everyone who has chance would like to sign Max in their car. Ola Kalunius, Mercedes CEO, echoes those sentiments. Chat, listen, I know I'm flogging a dead donkey here, but this is the story of the weekend. Everybody's after Max, and front and centre of that queue is one Toto Wolff. This is chaos. He's made it clear, even declaring Maximilian Verstappen the best driver on the grid. How much more upfront, explicit in your desire to sign that chap can you get? Mods, can you post the link? Yeah, no, definitely, but go ahead and post the link, mate. Hybrid says Toto and Max sitting in a tree. Hybrid, that's what it feels like, though. I don't want to trivialise nor bury the lead, but each and every single time I open my eyes and check the news, there is another material thing that's fed through. This time, Toto Wolff responding to Max's no sell in that question. Are you going to stay? All you needed to say, Max, was yes, I will be there. Why the need to caveat, I will be there next year? It's an important one, isn't it? You didn't need to say that. I will be there for the foreseeable future. I have a contract till 2028 and I will be at Red Bull up until then. That was your exam answer. But Maximilian Verstappen, being a truth sayer, he couldn't say that, right? Because he's considering his options. He's having conversations in real time with Toto Wolff and Mercedes-Benz CEO Ola. That's happening. That has happened at Miami, and those conversations will be ongoing. Toto Wolff will be doing all that he can to convince Maximilian Verstappen of that durable and competitive advantage that he hopes will come to pass in 2026. Listen, conjecture and speculation. Who would back against Mercedes having the best power unit in 2026? Not me. Who would back against Mercedes continuing to develop that W15 concept and return to form, making that car the market leader as soon as 2026? Not me. And do you think Maximilian Verstappen won't want to be in that car then if that happens? Lots of big ifs here. Lots of hypotheticals and conjecture. But bloody Nora. Gets techie. Bruce Dog, what's going on? I'm a bit late. What's happened? Toto Wolff, rewind back, Bruce Dog. Toto Wolff is speaking about Max's response to the question, are you going to be staying at Red Bull this weekend? Driver's press conference settings. It gets so techie. Oh gosh, what's Ender saying? Toto wants the strongest lineup, which would be Max and George, and that's probably stronger than Charles and Lewis. Oh, is that stronger than Oh, Game of Ender, you're asking the key questions. I don't know if it's a stronger lineup. I think that so techie, that Game of Ender. Oh, it's a toss up between Charles and Lewis and George and Max. You'd argue that if that were Mercedes lineup, that they'd be more aggressive. You know what I mean? Max and George, but they'd also be more combustible, right? George and Max would absolutely fight. And besides the point, Ender, I don't think Toto's in his mind's eye. I don't think he's alluding to George and Max. Is he not talking about Max and Kimi? Oh, the humanity, unthinkable. King George Russell of Kings Lynn, Norfolk, first of his name, looking for a seat. But stranger things have happened in F1, right? Like, look at Carlos Sainz Jr. as your exhibit A. How has he still not got a seat? He's juggling Williams and Audi and bloody Alpine balls. He's a brilliant driver. How is he there? I mean, if he can end up in this predicament, then surely George Russell, first of his name, can too, especially if Toto Wolff gets his way. You let me know in the chat. If you could keep one driver, are you keeping George or are you keeping Andrea Kimi Antonelli? It's too chaotic for me. My very small, noddy F1 mind cannot compute for this sort of stuff, nor can it solve for this ever-evolving motorsports Rubik's Cube. I just don't know. But what I do know is that Toto's going hard. Like, no quarter giving in this. Visual says, as long as Carlos Sainz isn't winning races, then Max and George is better because George won't bin it. Visual, what are you talking about, Visual? George won't bin it. Please see Singapore last year. Didn't he make, please see Australia, the non-brake test behind Fernando Plan Alonso? George has a cheeky unforced error in his locker. Always, especially if there are podiums at hand to be won in the latter stages of a Grand Prix. George is brilliant, don't get it twisted. You only need to look at turn 1 this weekend past at Spain. Like, how many of the 20 drivers have the cojones sufficient to pull off that move round the outside of Maximilian Verstappen? How do you mean? He's brilliant at his best, but the variability still is too great between him at his best and him at his worst. He still needs to chew his food before he swallows, per se. Eddie says Max himself is a stronger lineup than 2 current drivers, mate. Well, it depends on the other drivers that you're comparing against, doesn't it, Eddie? Put Checo, Perez and Logan Sargent in another car, or even in the RB20, and Max will probably score more points than them. Visual, you're a legend. Jones bins it every time and Carlos wins, mate. Thank you so much for the enduring support. It gets techie, doesn't it? What's Jay saying? Could be an interesting Polestar question. Strongest possible lineup of the current grid. One would guess Max and Lewis, but I doubt it since it would be too much fireworks. Yeah, they wouldn't get on well, would they? Not in the end. But this goes back to the age-old proposition. Do you want 2 number 1s? Could argue that this has been the failing of George and Lewis, right? That both of them want to be Beyonce. Nobody wants to be the backup dancer. They're both superstars, aren't they? They can't be mentor and mentee if indeed they want and have the capacity, the talent to get the same thing. It's techie, this. If you talk to Peter Windsor, he'll always argue that you need a number 1 and number 2. The F1 is too difficult a problem to solve for, to allow these unnecessary problems, unwelcome rancor, acrimony between drivers, driver hierarchy complexity to seep in. Already F1, if you harbour aspirations to win yourself championships and races, there are a multitude of complex balls and situations that you need to juggle and solve for respectively, right? How do you do that then if you already have issues with your driver hierarchy? You just make your life more difficult than necessary. Life in F1 is difficult as it is already. Difficult enough. Why would you make it more difficult by having 2 number 1s, a Lewis and a Max in the same car? It's just going to be chaos, right? Never worked ever. Especially if it's a close championship. If you get a 2016, you can afford for Nico and Lewis to take chunks out of each other, right? Because that car in that era was so dominant. But if, I don't know, say, and Vettel and Webber similarly, right? But if you've got a 2007, courtesy of McLaren in the hands of Alonso and Hamilton, how did that pan out? What they failed to do was establish a clear driver's hierarchy, and ultimately Alonso and Hamilton took too many points bites out of each other's haul, didn't they? And in the end, neither one of them would. They opened up the door. They parted the Red Sea like Noah and allowed Kimi Raikkonen to come and take his first and only championship. So that's, you just got to be careful with having two number ones. And I think in that vein, Ferrari next year could struggle potentially. It could get a bit techie, eh? And if you talk about Mercedes, then it would make sense if Toto Wolff's pole position as far as a driver's lineup is to have Max and Andrea Kimi Antonelli. You could argue that juice is more worth the squeeze than having Max and George, two superstars, two young, hungry lions who ultimately, I think, if my opinion's worth anything, would ultimately just get in each other's way. As techie as that is. Visual current, good, I said it. Logan and Perez owe the humanity, Joe. Visual, George is always studying to continuously improve like he did in Canada. Lewis doesn't like sim or track work. Oh, visual. You make a good point. You do make a very good point as far as George's outlook. But yet and still, he's still got a long way to... Do you know what I mean? He's got a long way to go. Same with Lando. It's almost like as far as the young crop, everyone not named Lewis or Fernando, it's almost like there's Max and there's the rest. Lando's spoken to this even as recently as this weekend's, or the build-up to this weekend's Grand Prix, right? Said on a number of occasions that last weekend he was operating at 99.5%. He needs that extra 50 bips to get him over the line. Like it's important, necessary even if he's to get himself race wins, silverware and championships. But I digress. Didn't George tell Lewis to retire or leave or something like that during the press conference? You know, so they did, Eddie, Mercedes did a separate press conference. Neither Mercedes driver was at the official F1 press conference. That was Max, Joe Granu, and a few of who I can't even remember. A couple of us. Charles was there, I think. I've yet to see the Mercedes one, I'll be honest. If Max mentored Kimi over humanity, can you imagine hybrid? It would get very, very techie. George lost too many years at Williams, 30 seconds behind or defending against faster. Did he lose too many? I think I'd argue differently, Visual. I think George needed those years, lest we forget the mistake that he made on Bottas at Imola, was it? Can't be making those mistakes. I think you can argue. I know, Visual, you're a big George fan, and he's brilliant. Absolutely will be a champion in future at some point. He has all the minerals, like all the killer instinct and the aggressive overtakes in abundance. But I still think you can make the argument that as at June 2024, that George is still a bit green. Still got lots of learning to do, as has Lando. It appears then that only one Maximilian Verstappen has reached his final form, courtesy of a battle for the ages against Lewis Hamilton in 2021. True or false? He didn't develop his racecraft. If George fails, it's on Toto's management. Oh, the humanity. We're getting techie on this George stuff, aren't we? Funky says, George said time to go. Fluffing hell. Is that what he said? Funky. Oh my God, I need to go and watch it. Is that what he said about Lewis? But somebody else said that about Lewis. Oh, Max. Remember when Max went in the post-race presser and he saw Lewis lying down? He was like, "You're getting old, mate." Are they bantering Lewis on age grounds now? Oh, the humanity! What are we doing? Kimi's currently safety in F2 to now put all your F1 marbles in the Kimi Antonelli basket would be opportunistic at best. But Jay, don't they always say, Brundle always trots out this anecdotally saying that if you're good enough, then you're old enough. I don't know. Has Kimi Antonelli proved just yet? For us, I'm not talking about the private testing that's going on in the background where everybody reports back and says he's been incredible. But has Kimi Antonelli proved in F2 just yet that he's better than the rest, that he has the potential to go on and be the next Max or the next Blue? I just don't know. I don't know. Have we seen that evidence just yet? Again, you've got to account for the fact that he skipped a stage, right? This should be his year in F3, not F2. Brand new cars at everything's level. Does that mean then that you're going to take that bigger gamble on Andrea Kimianta. I just don't know. It's so techy. Over George Russell. Imagine then, in 2026, they kick George Russell to the curb to make way for Max and Andrea. Oh my gosh. I cannot contact. That is bonkers. Tony says much funnier than when Max said no visual is right. George is damaged goods now. Oh my gosh. But you guys are killing George. I can't engage in the blasphemy. George is really good, man. How can you see turn one last race and say turn one lap one and say that George doesn't have the minerals to compete and or win championships at some point in the future? That's not to say he's hit his final form. He doesn't still have a cheeky mistake in his locker. But come on, guys. What are we doing here? George will probably get into Kimi's head and turn him into the latest slogan, Sergeant. George probably wouldn't be the best mentor, although he's come on record and said, I would give him every bit of help that he needed if it was mentorship. But he said already he thinks Kimi Antonelli is a good enough driver not to need that much mentorship. Not from him or anybody else. Death Reaper, damaged goods. He's good. That's what I'm saying, damaged goods. Damaged good, Death Reaper. George, damaged goods. Death Reaper, come on. I know. I agree with you, Death Reaper. We can't say that. Damaged goods. Not just yet. Green. Immature, maybe. Too aggressive sometimes. Misunderstands racing circumstance and what's needed at any given point during a race weekend. You can level all of those criticisms at George Russell, first of his name. But damaged goods. What, courtesy of the battle and the back and forth with Lewis? Nah, I can't argue that. Not just yet. George will need to be open and welcoming to Kimi, though. He said he will be, Jay. His remarks of Kimi finding his own path could have been phrased, but you're a bloody Nora, Jay. I thought he was pitch perfect, Jay. What could he have said better than that? I will give him any help that he needs, any mentoring that he requires, but I think Kimi Antonelli is a good enough driver to where he doesn't need any help from me or anybody else. What's wrong with that, Jay? I thought he was picked. That's like the best words that have ever come out of King George Russell's mouth. I don't think it's unsalvageable. But him fighting Lando in Barca and costing himself time to Lewis is an example of his... I completely agree with that visual. We just talked about understanding the race circumstance. That's not your race, George. Trying to kill yourself to defend to Lando and Norris. You've got to understand very quickly, by virtue of some sort of motoring, agile thinking, that that's not your race. And in fighting Lando, as fun as it was for us as viewers, you're losing yourself time, right? Instantly, the second that Lando gets past you, you've fallen into the DRS zone of one Sir Lewis Hamilton. So it's techie. Jomo says average at best with good grumpy face. Oh my gosh. Why am I out here defending? I've got to defend George. Tony says, Peter Windsor says, George is the real deal. I'm not challenging that by any means. I think he's the real deal. After last weekend, chat, we really said, look, all right, on the negatives, on the downside, okay, not pragmatic enough. Again, sometimes towards the latter stage of races, mention no names, Singapore last year, he fails to chew his food before he swallows. Like he's got to take time, right? Set up those moves, particularly when there's like a podium on the line. Sometimes he just gets too eager and he's like, I need to make this move, and you see it in him, and that's when he starts making mistakes. But that aside, like over the past 14 days, 8-2 as versus Lewis Hamilton season to date. What are we doing? Like that's not bad. You can't beat Lewis in qualifying so frequently, even if it is on fine margins. If you're not the real deal, right? Like, I don't know, put some respect on his name. You phrased it a little different. Yeah, no, Jay, I can't have that. If George is damaged good, then Charles damaged goods as well. Oh my gosh, Jay. It's far too early in the morning to talk about Charles being damaged goods. This one's chaos. Charles isn't damaged. Charles driven, listen, as much as I have been very disparaging of late about modern day journalism, I think Charles' season has been a good one. He's beating Carlos Sainz round in. That speaks volumes, especially since I hold Carlos in such high regard. But I mean, Charles again last weekend, that cheeky love kiss with Lando Norris, was deliberate and egregious, and the fact that he only got a reprimand for it is a nonsense. The FIA doing what the FIA do so brilliantly and just being F1 baloney, consistently inconsistent. Like, what are we doing, FIA? You got to give that dude a penalty for being so deliberately egregious. That wasn't an accident, that move on Lando Norris. You got to punish him for that. And the Charles Fossey will talk about, wow, what happened in the race and why did Carlos No, let's take some responsibility here, Charles. You are a brilliant driver, but you can't leverage that to absolve for your responsibility and accountability in some of these scenarios. Why were you touching Lando Norris's car there? What, out of frustration because he held you up? It's free practice, lad. Therein lies the reasons why I always be very, very harsh on Charles. The unforced errors are unacceptable for a driver of his capacity, his talent, his potential. He's rapid. A to B. Which one of those drivers currently on the grid are quicker than him? You will see it next year when he goes head to head with Lewis Hamilton, one of the quickest drivers that I've ever seen in my life. Charles will be rapid. He will fare well against Lewis Hamilton in qualifying, rest assured. But he's got to filter out for the mistakes, hasn't he? Not good enough. Every Lewis teammate has come away spitting and sputtering anger and aggression. Tony, be careful though, mate, because Lewis has lost to a couple of teammates, hasn't he? The Lewis deniers and naysayers will always cite Nico Rosberg, Jenson Button, that Bottas ran him close a couple of seasons. They'll always have one. That will always, if you're arguing with a Lewis Hamilton denier, that will be their devil's advocate play. They will always cite that as their reason why Lewis Hamilton is a fast car merchant. I can't buy into that thesis. I don't think that's true. But again, it's too early in the morning for me to indulge meaningfully in such blasphemy. Take him and kill him, place him into the cockpit, and he's able to drive the car. Are you on about visual? You're alluding to the old, if you have enough monkeys and give them enough typewriters, that one of them will end up typing out Shakespeare's sonnets. That's a thought experiment that somebody's espoused a long time. I can't remember the name of it. But yeah. Now, if the car's quick, then you'll have somebody that can drive it to championships, right? But this goes back to bloody Max's thesis originally, right? We can't continue to be perfect each and every single weekend. You need a dominant car, he said, if indeed you are going to win races and championships. Therefore, he's going to leave, isn't it? Listen, here's the if and analysis. If Red Bull don't sort out this car, revert to mean and become the dominant package, give him something to look forward to in 2026, then they might have a problem. I think Max won't hesitate to leave. I think the likes of Helmut Marko and bloody Jos Verstappen, his father, will be pushing him towards that door. They've had enough of Christian Horner and his shenanigans, his power plays, his leveraging British financiers with a view to spin off Red Bull F1 technologies, trying to become the Toto Wolff of Red Bull, a shareholder come team principal. You know what I mean? It will get techie. I apologise for too much bitterness on my behalf today. Still suffering from, oh no, Tony. Are we going there again? I can't even do the Lance stuff. I'm too fragile emotionally, too devoid of bandwidth. It's a shame, right, that Lance Stroll has the whip hand, courtesy of his dad's money, primarily. And meanwhile, the likes of Felipe and Teo and a gazillion others are all sat on the bench. I always cite Felipe and Teo, though, because, of course, they're the two most recent F2 winners. F2 designed by the FIA to be the pathway into Formula One, ostensibly win that championship and you're all but guaranteed a place in the premier motorsports formula in the world. That was the pitch, and the reality is mismatched to that. There is theory and there is practice, and that's what we're dealing with, sadly, as a result of which all of these young drivers, the young hungry lions, their careers are going to waste. What are we doing? I cannot. It's too techie. Come to Daddy Toto. In your opinion, how good or bad Aston Martin Honda engine? How good or bad will it be in 2026? It's a bloody good question. Listen, Honda have a very sporadic relationship with Formula One, right? Peter Wins always cracks the joke that Honda do all the groundwork, set up the building blocks for like a championship winning power unit, and then withdraw from the sport and can't claim all the credit. They kind of did that with Red Bull. They built the championship winning power unit and then withdrew, didn't they? It's bonkers. Now they should be getting all of this credit that Red Bull are now trying to parlay into their efforts, their own efforts. How good will they be in 2026? It's anyone's guess, isn't it? I can't say. My crystal ball is as murky as the next person's. But I will say this: Aston Martin have a lot of financial backing, courtesy of Aramco. Their soft, vulnerable underbelly, though, as far as Aston Martin's package, is of course Lance Stroll. Honda absolutely can build. They've done it before a number of times. They can build themselves a championship-winning power unit. I'm not sure. I'd anticipate that as far as the 50-50 split between combustion engine and electric, that maybe they're not necessarily at the forefront like a Mercedes as an example, but they will have knowledge and intellectual property using which they can get back to near the front, maybe. Conjecture and speculation. Honda plays too many games. I know. Why would you leave? Why leave? Rorschach says, RB sandbagging. What about Perez? Is that part of the plan? Rorschach, I just don't buy into this sandbagging thing. I just don't see it. Not now. Not now. It's too close. Like sandbag until, do you know what I mean? Sandbag and still give yourself some wiggle room. Comfy wiggle room. No, it's not comfy. That Grand Prix last weekend, I mean, that was serious. And when you're giving away victories to Lando Norris now, like it's not just sandbagging, is it? In my humble opinion. For what it's worth, who do you think will provide engines to Alpine? Let's talk about Mercedes potentially. Who else is in? Ferrari. I think Mercedes are the favourites, you know, if indeed they do withdraw. There's still speculation about they're losing money hand over fist. They're not pummeling the money requisite to develop themselves a serious power unit in 2026. The other teams are circa 100 million a year at this juncture, and Alpine are spending anywhere between 40 and 50 million. It's not enough. But again, it makes sense from a finance perspective. It would make sense to divest out of manufacturing engines and just pay Mercedes 15 to 30 million, right? Why would you if you can't even do it well? Why would you continue to spend all that money? 600 million thus far, as far as their tenure in F1 is concerned. That's how much they've spent on trying to develop engines, and still now. That Alpine, that Renault power unit is like anywhere between 15 and 30 brake horsepower, depending on who you talk to, down on the rest of the field, the quickest one. So what's the point, right? Save yourself some money, like anywhere up to 50 million, and just outsource it. Get the best power unit on the grid, maybe. Tony Red Bull claims to have hired all of HPP. Yeah, Red Bull do claim a lot of things, don't they? I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. What will happen if Alpine can't get an engine? Or FIA? No, they will be able to get an engine. Jomo, got to keep F1 close, or no one watches till the end. Absolutely, Jomo. You guys have heard me diatribe about that. They need to make sure it's that the result isn't obvious before the race weekend starts, and that's what it's been kind of to a certain extent. In like the first 5 or 6 races, it's changed now because McLaren have taken a step forward, but it will get techie. Why leave? Max wants a 2022 year at Red Bull, right? Now it becomes a 2021 year. Why would he leave? So here's the thing, Ron. If you listen back to everything that Max is saying, so I read out a couple of quotes at the start. You might want to rewind it and have a watch. There's a couple of things that Max has said, Around the fundamental flaws. Remember, we thought for a while back it was going to be around only a couple of tracks, Canada and Monaco, Singapore maybe, where Red Bull were going to struggle. At all the other tracks, we expected them to dominate just like they always have been. But that thesis has changed. Max told us that it was a fundamental flaw. This wasn't like an anomaly, that they would struggle and that they'd been struggling. He'd been driving around this issue for the longest time. He's also said that what's important in F1 is that you have the most competitive package. If you harbour aspirations to win races, if not championships even. He's also said that he will be here next year. Why next year? Why did he need to say next year underlined? Why didn't he say see out his contract and be here to 2028? Why didn't he say that he'd be here for the foreseeable future? Why didn't he just say, do you know what I mean? Why did he say he would be here next year? If he left next year, after next year, and joined Mercedes in 2026, that statement would still stand up, wouldn't it? Max to Ferrari, says hybrid maybe. I've heard people talk about that. Oh, the humanity. We've got free practice to go and watch. It's a sprint weekend. I'm going to try and get here for the sprint shootout, but potentially not. I will definitely be here streaming 30 minutes before qualifying and 30 minutes before the race. We'll have a proper catch-up later on. The Friday stream is always heated, back and forth. I will engage meaningfully in all F1 discourse, and you guys will tell me how much of a noddy, basic F1 mind I am. But I digress. Between now and next time, the prosecution rests. No further questions, Your Honour.